But first, let's talk about that first meeting between Anthony Albanese and Donald Trump, which really is the next big thing on the political calendar. As I speak to you now, as is often the way with these summits, there's no guarantee Anthony Albanese will be meeting his US counterpart, but the expectation is such a meeting is likely to occur. A question mark exists over whether this would take the shape of a formal bilateral meeting, a sidelines chat, and there are even questions as to whether Mr. Trump will definitely attend the G7 gathering. But the anticipation around a meeting comes after US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth requested from our Defence Minister and Deputy PM Richard Marles in Singapore last week that Australia lift its defence spending from the current trajectory due to hit 2.33% of GDP to 3.5% of GDP. The cost of that has been put at about $40 billion a year, or doubling our deficit. And there appears to be no specifics in terms of what the Americans want. They're making the case to all countries to lift their spending. Australia is already seeking to spend $360 billion on US and UK submarines and provide a range of, and we provide, should I say, a range of defence facilities with the US. And we're buying missiles. The Prime Minister, as he has made clear, is not ruling out spending more on defence, but he doesn't want to adhere to some arbitrary target. Any extra spending has to be around specific commitments Australia needs. Australia's Defence Chief David Johnston poured fuel on the fire on this story at an ASPI conference during the week.
Perhaps finally, we're having to reconsider Australia as a homeland from which we will conduct combat operations. And that, again, is a very different way, almost since the Second World War, about how we think of national resilience and preparedness of we may need to operate and conduct combat operations from this country. And that's everything from our northern infrastructure, our supply chains, how we integrate with industry, states and territories is quite a different answer to that notion of operating from the homeland.
But there's a belief in the Australian government that we'll never see a Chinese government invade Australia, as much as some of the commentariat point to such a situation. The view is our defence assets, like missiles and submarines, are more about protecting trade routes. Anyway, the PM believes it won't be defence that will dominate talks with the US president if and when they occur, but trade. There are three issues here. The increase in steel tariffs that Donald Trump announced last week from 25% to 50%, the 10% tariff he put on all foreign goods in April, and the effect on the global economy from his tariffs on places including China, which actually affects Australia the worst out of those three issues. There was an offer prepared prior to Mr. Trump's tariffs decision in April to give Australia an exemption in exchange for access to critical minerals. It was seriously considered in the Trump administration, I'm told, but the suspicion is it was knocked on the head by Mr. Trump's trade advisor, Peter Navarro. Australia is also working on the prospect of allowing US beef imports into Australia and relaxing the biosecurity rules around that.